They thought she would never fight back. Asterisk, nobody ever expected much from Elisa Wren. She was the girl who always sat at the back of the room, a fragile wisp of a thing in a baggy gray hoodie, her hair hanging like a curtain to shield her eyes. Her voice was as soft as moth wings, and she seemed to fold in on herself whenever someone looked her way. Asterisk, and that morning, when the bell rang and the class clattered to life, no one noticed her slip into her seat. No one except the three boys already plotting how they'd make her life even smaller. Asterisk, Mr. Harlan's biology class was an easy place to disappear if you wanted to. He always started the period with a 10-minute lecture about things nobody cared about: photosynthesis, cell walls, mitochondria, and he never looked up from his PowerPoint. It was exactly the sort of environment where someone like Eliza could be made a target over and over again. Asterisk, the boys Casey, Darren, Matt watched her out of the corners of their eyes as she set her battered backpack on the floor and sank into her chair. Casey's lip curled, a smirk coiling across his face as he nudged Darren. Asterisk, watch this, he whispered, already relishing the thrill of it. Asterisk, they moved with the casual swagger of kids who'd never been told no, kids who believed they were untouchable, and maybe until that morning they were. Asterisk, Eliza's pencil was tapping nervously against her desk, a tiny staccato that betrayed how tense she was, even in silence. She felt them approaching before she saw them, her stomach clenched. A sick, familiar dread welled up in her chest, threatening to choke her. Asterisk, hey Mouse, Casey said, leaning over her. Did you hear me? I said, hey asterisk. She didn't look up. That was the only way she knew to survive. Pretend she wasn't there. Pretend she was somewhere else. Asterisk, don't ignore me. Casey sneered, and his hand shot out, closing around her throat. Asterisk, a gasp shot through the class, though no one moved to intervene. The teacher droned on, oblivious behind his projector. Asterisk, Casey's fingers tightened. Darren and Matt snickered behind him. The pressure was sudden, shocking. Eliza's pencil clattered to the floor. Spots burst across her vision as her airway shrank to nothing. Asterisk, look at me, Casey hissed. Asterisk, but when she raised her eyes, they weren't empty the way he'd expected. They were clear, burning, even, and locked onto his with something he didn't recognize. Asterisk, it was the first time in her life Elisa Wren ever let herself feel the heat that had lived in her chest since she was little. Asterisk, the rage. Asterisk, it happened faster than anyone could process. One moment Casey was squeezing her throat, the next his wrist was pinned in a vice grip. He didn't even have time to protest before she twisted. Asterisk, there was a sharp, wet pop. Asterisk, the scream that tore out of Casey's mouth was shrill and thin, almost animal. His wrist bent at an impossible angle, bone jutting under the skin. He staggered backward, clutching it with his other hand, face gone bloodless. Asterisk, Jesus Christ, Darren yelped, lunging forward like he meant to tackle her. Asterisk, but Eliza was already moving, pivoting her weight into a second hold she'd learned years ago when her father first taught her how to survive the world when he wouldn't always be there to protect her. She caught Darren's hand mid-swing and wrenched it back. Another pop, another shriek. Asterisk, Matt froze, his mouth hanging open. As the reality of it registered, asterisk, the entire class had gone silent. Even Mr. Harlan had stopped talking, the drone of his voice replaced by the frantic keening of Casey and Darren. Asterisk, Eliza's chest heaved. She looked around the room, her hand still wrapped around Darren's limp wrist. Nobody moved, not one person. Asterisk, and for the first time in her life, she knew she wasn't the one who should be afraid. The principal's office was suffocatingly warm. Eliza sat in the hard plastic chair outside the door, her hands folded in her lap. They were still trembling. Asterisk, she knew she should feel sorry. That was the narrative she'd always been fed. Quiet girls didn't stand up, didn't fight back, didn't hurt people even when they deserved it. Asterisk, but when she closed her eyes, she felt again the bruising pressure of Casey's fingers on her windpipe, the buzzing darkness in her brain as she fought for air. And she didn't feel sorry at all. She felt free. Her mother arrived 15 minutes later, still in her uniform from the diner, apron smudged with flour and grease. She looked at Eliza, searching her face for some sign that her daughter was the same girl she'd sent off to school that morning. Asterisk, Eliza, she whispered, oh sweetheart, what happened? Asterisk, they tried to choke me. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. I stopped them. Asterisk, her mother's eyes glistened. She pulled Eliza close and pressed her face into her hair. The hug was fierce, protective. For a moment, Eliza felt like a child again, safe in the circle of her mother's arms. Asterisk, I'm so proud of you, she whispered. Asterisk, when they went inside the principal's office, the atmosphere turned colder. Principal Crowley was a thin gray man with a permanently pinched expression. He didn't look up from the disciplinary report as he spoke. Asterisk, Ms. Wren, your daughter has assaulted 2 classmates, both of whom will require surgery. Asterisk, they were choking her. Asterisk, they claim it was horseplay gone wrong. I couldn't breathe, Eliza said quietly. Principal Crowley finally looked up, his gaze sharp. And so you decided to break their wrists? Asterisk, yes, she said. I did. There was no apology in her voice. A tense silence settled in the office. The principal shifted in his chair, as if unnerved by the lack of regret. Asterisk, be that as it may, he said finally, We cannot condone violence. Eliza will be suspended for 5 days. Asterisk, her mother opened her mouth to protest, but Eliza laid a hand on her arm. It was okay. Let them call it punishment if they needed to. She knew, in her bones, that she'd done what she had to. Asterisk, when they stepped back out into the hall, the rumors had already begun to ripple through the school. Students clustered in nervous knots, whispering. Some looked at Eliza with awe, others with fear. She ignored them. Asterisk, it wasn't until the following week that Eliza realized the full extent of what she'd done. Asterisk, her suspension passed in a blur of restless days and sleepless nights. She replayed the moment again and again. Casey's hand on her throat, the panic rising, the sudden clarity, the way the boys' faces had transformed when they understood she was no longer prey. Asterisk, when she returned, something had changed. Asterisk, the first morning back, she walked into biology class, the same desks, the same walls, the same musty smell of old textbooks, but the atmosphere was different. Asterisk, Casey and Darren were absent. She knew they wouldn't be back for weeks. Matt was there though. He stared down at his desk, refusing to look at her. No one dared whisper as she passed. She took her seat. No pencil tapping this time. Her hands were calm. Asterisk, when Mr. Harlan began his lecture, she let her gaze drift across the room, and for the first time in her life, she saw no sneers, no smirks, no amusement at her expense. She had stopped being invisible. Asterisk, it didn't happen overnight. But in the weeks that followed, other kids began to talk to her. Asterisk, first it was Mara, the shy girl from geometry class who had always sat alone at lunch. She slipped into the seat across from Eliza one afternoon, her tray rattling with nerves. Asterisk, hi, she said. I just wanted to say, what you did was really brave. Asterisk, Eliza felt warmth spread through her chest. She didn't know how to respond. Thanks, she managed. Then came Jordan, a boy from history who'd once laughed when Casey tripped her in the hall. He mumbled an apology she hadn't known she'd needed to hear. Asterisk, one by one, others followed, people she'd never spoken to before, some with stories of their own times they'd been cornered, belittled, hurt. Asterisk, she realized that the fear she'd carried for so long hadn't only belonged to her. It had been stitched into the seams of every kid who'd ever been told they were too quiet to matter, and somehow, by fighting back, she'd torn it open. Asterisk, one afternoon, as she sat in the library finishing an essay, someone approached. Asterisk, Eliza. Asterisk, she looked up. Matt stood there, his hands jammed in his pockets. His shoulders were hunched, as if he expected her to hit him. Asterisk, I wanted to say sorry, he stammered. What we did was, it wasn't right. Asterisk, she studied him for a moment, weighing whether he was sincere. His eyes were wet, blinking rapidly. Asterisk, I don't expect you to forgive me, he went on, voice cracking, but I needed you to know. Asterisk, she nodded. The anger in her had cooled. What was left was something quieter, something that looked almost like pity. Asterisk, I hope you learn from it, she said simply. Asterisk, he swallowed hard, nodded, and walked away. Eliza exhaled. Asterisk, by the end of the semester, she'd stopped sitting in the back of the room. Asterisk, she'd stopped hunching her shoulders and staring at the floor. Asterisk, she'd joined the girls' self-defense class at the rec center, where she found herself surrounded by others who wanted to shed their fear. She discovered she was good at it. Really good. Asterisk, when the instructor asked her to demonstrate techniques, she didn't shy away. She didn't hide. And when she walked home in the evenings, her head was high, her steps steady. The last day of school, Mara slipped her a folded piece of paper. Inside was a single sentence, scrawled in blue ink. You showed me it's okay to fight back. Asterisk, Eliza read it twice, her chest tight. Asterisk, sometimes she wondered if she could have done it differently, if she could have found some other way to stop them. But she also knew this. Asterisk, no one would ever choke the life out of her again.